10 At the flower of life pattern is creating a web of octave 7s formed by the intersections Fig C. Fig C Platonic solids as energy in the matrix branches outward through the flower of life's ratcheting vortex motion. Different Platonic solid shapes emerge perfectly nesting inside each other Fig D. This nesting creates an infinite fractal progression of solids' ability to transform seamlessly from one shape to the other. Platonic solids are fractal, i.e. they nest perfectly inside each other in an infinite sequence. All the geometries fit perfectly within each other. Visit cosmiccore.org for more info on flower of life and geometry in general. 11 Fig D. This image by Robert Moon illustrates how Platonic solids shapes nest inside each other. Fig E. Platonic solids series Platonic solid faces can fractalize out into infinite iterations till they create perfect spheres. Tetrahedron fractalizes out and forms the star tetrahedron, then an isotropic vector matrix IVM, then a more complex IVM. If the process were to continue, eventually it would form a perfect sphere. Each Platonic 12 solid can do this their own way. Each Platonic solid can be represented with close-packed spheres. Tetrahedron equals 4 spheres, octahedron equals 6 spheres, cube equals 14 spheres, icosahedrons 12 or 32 spheres, dodecahedron equals 32 spheres forms both icosahedrons and dodecahedron cube octahedron Archimedean solid 13 spheres 12 around one isotropic vector matrix IVM -64 tetrahedral grid. The straight line version of the flower of life is the isotropic vector matrix. The q-octahedron vector equilibrium is at the center of the IVM. You can extend the V outward to two equal vectors and equal 60-degree angles from its center to form an isotropic vector matrix. Isotropic equals all the same vector equals line of energy matrix equals pattern of lines in energy. The IVM consists of alternating tetrahedral and octahedral geometries arranged together. Octahedra and tetrahedra can tessellate. 32 positive tetrahedrons pointing up, 32 negative tetrahedrons pointing down. The IVM is a 3D fractal structure that grows in perfect octaves. This octave structure is part of the geometric laws that govern our universe. Growth happens in octaves according to observations of light, sound, color, the periodic table, cell replication, and our own spiritual well-being through the chakra system. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say the isotropic vector matrix represents the boundaries of each consecutive set of 7 waves in an infinite ocean of 7s. Now this next section defines the properties of circles as they expand outward in the flower of life pattern, but I'm drawing their comparisons to the properties of 7 waves, 1 through 7 as I have come to know them through developing 7th wave principle. 13 Circle 1 Incomprehensible hours from the one comes the all. Energy expands out all around itself from the source moving equally in all directions creating a first central sphere. Reproduction. Sperm becomes a sphere and increases in size to the exact same size as the female pronucleus. Circle to the overlapping circles form the vesica tissues which contains knowledge about width, depth, proportions, the square root of 2, 3 and 5, the decad of regular polygons thus the 5 Platonic solids and the geometric information known like figure 9 to 7. The diag represents 2 interrelated forces of electromagnetism and gravity and is considered to be the womb of creation. Reproduction. Male and female pronuclei merge to form a 3D vesica tissues mirroring the first motion in Genesis creation, but they must be of equal size. The 2 pronuclei permeate each other to form a single sphere within a sphere. The human zygote is the first cell of the human body, a sphere within a sphere. One of the polar bodies will move north and the other south. The tube forms through the center of them both and half the chromosomes line up with one side of the tube and half on the other side. This creates the first division creating the first 2 cells revealing the principle of octaves. Having equates to doubling. Circle 3 tetrad. The third circle is added with its center on a point where the first 2 circles intersect creates a triangle that represents the tetrahedron, a fundamental geometric structure of space and the structural geometry of a photon. The triangle created by the intersections of the 3 overlapping circles can be folded up to form the tetrahedron figure 9 to 8. 14 Circle for tetrad. The fourth circle added tetrad represents the 4 elements of the tetrahedron, octahedron and Q and icosahedron figure 9 to 9. Platonic solid inversion. I had previously discovered that wave 4 has no parallel but itself, and in quantum physics Platonic solids have duals. Each solid has its own dual, an inversion. To find the dual, define the center point of each face and connect these points in 3D space. The cube is dual with the octahedron. The dodecahedron is dual to an icosahedron. The tetrahedron is dual with itself and forms a star tetrahedron, stellate octahedron, 3D Star of David. Reproduction. 2 cells become 4 cells. If you connect the centers of the first 4 close-packed cells forms the tetrahedron. Circle 5 feet pentad exactly 1/2 is completed. We've moved 180 degrees from the point of first motion. The pentad represents the formation of life's simplest forms moving up to more complex life. Encapsulates the golden ratio phi spiral figure 9:10. Circle 6 hexade. The hexad represents the formation of space, form and time process. Hexagonal geometry creates physical boundaries in molecules, molecule lattices, crystals, cell formation and so on. The hexad marries the tetrad with the pentad to create all various forms of life and matter. Figure 9-11. 15 Circle 7 heptad represents a return to source through a 7-step transformation process. The 7 steps represent the 7 diatonic notes of the musical scale, the 7 colors of visible light in the spectrum, and the 7 chakras of energy in all living beings. These 7 steps create the whole process. Figure 9-12. Wave 8 octaves. I had discovered myself that waves link together in octaves as we go up and down in time scale, and this is confirmed by quantum mechanics as I read on the flower of life and discovered that the 8th step represented by expanding a seed of life into flower of life and on into the fruit of life, each change denoting a higher or lower octave. Every 8 wave per circle represents wave 1 in a new set of 7 in an infinite ocean of octave 7s. Reproduction. 4 cells become 8 cells forms an egg of life. If you connect the centers of the close-packed spheres creates a star tetrahedron or the cube. 8 cells to 16 cells, the centers of the close-packed spheres connect to form another star tetrahedron or a cube. 32 cells they become the icosahedron/dodecahedron. X64, X128, X256, X512. At 512 cells a torus is formed called a morula, resembles an apple cored out with a tube down the center. This hollow space becomes the lungs. We hit the outside inside. The first cell divides 8 times at octave point 512. The structure is the size of an average human cell and a tube torus is formed. This represents the process of life moving through the Platonic solids of the geometric energy web that's all around us. I think as waves go through their various stages they're subject to the same forces and principles we see in the flower of life geometry. 16 Concepts of a waveform universe. A waveform universe involves sine waves corresponding to light and vibration of sound. Everything in reality is formed as a sine or cosine wave. Wavelengths, frequencies and patterns help to differentiate between different objects. Waveform is also called pattern, sine wave signature, or sound. All waveform contain embedded geometry. So everything in the universe is created by vibrational packets of waves with varying frequency, wavelengths and harmonics. You can observe the patterns of generated frequencies with the study of cymatics. The oscillation of waves creates interference patterns of standing waves of geometry. Matter precipitates upon the standing waves of geometry to create all matter that we know in 3D. The flower of life was often drawn by Leonardo da Vinci in his notebooks. Da Vinci calculated angles and proportions, ratios, and geometries for many in his inventions using the flower of life geometry. 17 Fig F. The flower of life pattern represents a primal language of our universe encapsulating information on pure shape, proportions, information about cycles, laws of physics and even model the morphogenetic structure of the physical world. The all-encompassing flower of life was central to the Egyptian mystery schools. They revered this all-encompassing symbol of a circle divided into repetitions of the versica Pisces. Was this process repeating sevenfold, rotating outward to create a cell that every 8th division, every set of 7 a new set of 7 begins. The process repeats infinitely, creating a matrix. Each cell contains the pattern of the whole matrix. As each cell contains the pattern of the entire matrix, The flower of life also works as a hologram, as such it's analogous to the universe. The branching patterns are said to describe the geometry of light interacting as genetic material within cells of a human body. An arrangement of genetic code in DNA even branches within essential amino acids. The flower of life's vortex motion of outward rotation forms a donut-shaped tube which 18 is fundamental to the generation and regeneration of matter. It shows how energy flows into itself and out of itself similar to a magnetic field. The fruit of life pattern Fig G. 19. Adding the third layer of spheres we come to the fruit of life pattern Fig G. 13 circles or 12 around 1. This fruit of life is the building block from which the fabric of reality was created. The fruit of life carries within it 13 systems of information governing the geometric aspects underlying reality. The pattern of the vertices of a fruit of life represent two interlocking tetrahedron. The tetrahedron is a Pythagorean representation of a divine all symbolized with 10 dots arranged in a triangle. 19. Adding the third layer of spheres we come to the fruit of life pattern Fig G. 13 circles or 12 around 1. This